All right, we are now on the stream, so do not talk until I get going, okay? Next on Inside the SCCA, getting ready for COTA. On this episode of Inside the SCCA, we're ramping up for rounds 3 and 4 of the Hoosier Racing Tires Super Tour. Zach Whitston is with us. He is the winner of both of last year's rounds of the Formula Vee races at the Circuit of the Americas Super Tour. He joins us tonight to talk about last year's races, COTA, and also a little bit about Austin, Texas, where he lives. One of the coolest places on earth, by the way. Welcome to this year's show, or this second attempt at live on YouTube. I'm Brian Belansky, and I appreciate everybody joining us here. We tried this a couple of weeks back, had some issues. I think we've got them solved, and we're going to see what we're doing here. We've got Zach here with us. How you doing, Zach?
Good. Thanks for having me on, Brian.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. Welcome to the show. This is your first time on Inside the SCCA, so we're now on episode 80 something, and it's really cool to kind of reach out and meet some of these people from all around the country. This year, I am lucky enough to be one of the television live stream hosts of the SCCA Super Tour races, and next up is COTA. So first off, before we get to COTA, tell me a little bit about Zach and how you got into this crazy racing thing.
I was born into it. My dad's been a member of SCCA, I believe, for 50 years. He's been involved with Formula Vee racing specifically for 45 some years. And so I grew up at the racetrack. It was a way of life. I'm 40. So, he's been doing this longer than I've been around. And so it was just part of growing up. I did not get involved with racing until, I want to say this year is my 5th year.
Okay.
It might be my 6th year. I'd got to do the math. But, family and career and all that stuff in the 20s and early 30s. I think I got involved around 34, 35 after we had our first son. And, my wife kind of gave me the nod, and we had the financial ability finally to get involved. But how it really happened is through the SCCA track days. I had a car, and from going to the runoffs, watching my older brother and my dad racing Formula Vee, you hear those advertisements, SCCA track days, you gotta go. And I'm sitting there, and I heard about Harris Hill. It was about an hour away from me where I lived.
Right.
And at the time, I had a nice manual Audi, and I said, I could run this on the track. And I'm driving down there, call my older brother, Andy, and I go, I'm going to a track day. And he goes, turn around. You can't undo what you're about to do. I went on to do, I think, 3 track days. And my father was very supportive. He goes, you could go to get your license next year. And the rest is history.
Yeah. So I have a like many. I told you when we started that I always start with this question, and it runs kind of along several different themes. My dad is my fault. It's dad's fault story is very common.
Or is
Same thing for me. My dad, I was 16, and my dad had a bit of a health scare, and the doctor said, you need to go and get a hobby. So a couple of months later, Dad walks into the doctor's office with the SCCA physical form. And the doctor looks at it, looks at my dad, and looks at it, looks at my dad, and says, I was thinking more like, stamp collecting, tiddlywinks, something. And but if this will relax you, let's do it. So and my dad's first car was a Formula Vee. When he went back to racing, my dad raced back in the '60s, but when he came back to racing, he started with a Formula Vee, and so that was the first car he ever wrenched on. And I was 16 at the time. And then coming full circle, when I started doing some of my own racing, I bought a Formula V2 and did that for about a season. And I am not of the proper girth to fit in a Formula V comfortably. So I ended up in sedans eventually. But yeah, so very much the same story. Did you go to Formula V immediately? But what were your steps to get there?
Yeah, it's Formula V immediately.
Okay.
I've never considered another class. I think part of the experience is running with now my younger brother as well, who got involved maybe 2-3 years ago. My older brother's been involved for 11, 12 years. And then again, my father, 45 years or something in Formula V. It's about the family. It's about the experience. It's magical. We go on the track. We compete hard. We get in tiffs and arguments and competition.
No.
You won't believe it. At the end of the day, there's nothing more magical.
Right.
It's absolutely amazing.
I talk about it a lot, and a lot of people talk about it on the podcast, how SCCA is a big family. And a lot of times, you kind of find the SCCA because you're car people, but you stick around because of the people. But you actually race with family. When I was looking at last year's Super Tour results, I was like, Whitston. It's like there's like 10 of you, right? Or 27 of you. How many of you are actually running Formula V now?
There's 4 of us.
Oh, it's
3
only 4.
brothers and a dad.
All brothers and a dad. Okay. Okay. And how much of a rivalry is there between the 4 of you?
It's healthy competition. It's healthy. We all share video, we share tips, but that happens inside the family, but I also think it happens inside of Formula V.
Sure.
A lot of these competitors that we'll run with this weekend, we have in the past, you have a question about a turn or the car. We want to beat people on the track,
right?
Not in the pits. And, we all work together. I think Formula V is a big family, and obviously, the Whitstons, we compete.
Yeah.
We work together, and, it's fun.
We had Lauren Brailer on the podcast a couple of months back or a month and a half back. And, Formula V is not known to be a young person's class necessarily.
Sure.
I would guess that the median age of the Formula V driver is probably somewhere north of 40 in many cases. But, she's a teenager and a lady, and she was so impressed with how she was welcomed into the class.
Sure.
Is that the experience you get as far as basically going to the track? Do you guys all paddock together? How does that all work?
Yeah. As far as paddock together, sometimes not, but it can be fierce as can be on the track, and you get off and everyone's high-fiving and shaking hands. Right. It's been nothing but welcoming in Formula V, and we try to pass that on and try to welcome new people into the class as well.
So, with the idea that it's not necessarily a young driver's class, what can be done to change that?
I think there is some shift. You've got a lot of families, second, third generations coming into Formula V. You look at Brian Farnham, who won the runoffs, and the Abbotts, second generation. Lawheads have a second generation. There's a lot of second and third generations starting, so I think it's getting passed on. I think iRacing is starting to do some help as far as launching the Formula Vee
Right.
into the virtual world. And then I also think some of the stuff SCCA is doing as far as the coverage, this podcast, it's a very, I'm not going to say easy, but it's an approachable class to get involved with and start cutting your teeth. There is a learning curve and there are barriers to entry, but it's doable without having $1 million.
Right. Right. A lot of kids go to karts and then they want to go into something, fast with a wing, and fast with the wing is a lot of dollars. There's a lot of zeros in that budget. And none of what we do is cheap, but if you're looking for bang for your buck in any kind of motorsports, it's hard to argue with the cost effectiveness of a Formula V program.
Well, there's a couple of things you just said there. It's not cheap if it has a wing.
Right.
But that's if everything works.
Right.
You tear a corner off the car, it gets very expensive. One of my favorite video clips, and I say that with some hesitancy, it wasn't great.
Right.
But at the beginning of the runoffs in Virginia, you see 5 years ago, you see a whole lot of cars get into a messy situation. I don't know how many cars were involved with it. 12, 13, 14 cars. Every single car drives away.
Right.
And I don't know any other class that's happening. These are tried and true tough cars.
Yeah.
That it takes a lot to do extensive damage.
Right. Well, and if you have, one of the other winged classes, except for maybe FE2, where it's a spec class, if you tear a corner off your car, you better have those spares in your trailer, because there may be no other car at the racetrack that's the same as your car. You tear a corner off a Formula V, and as long as there's a couple of other Formula Vs there's probably a couple of other cars that have the exact same parts in their trailer that you can get help with. And you're going to get 10 people who will show up who've changed that corner themselves 100 times, and they're going to help you fix your car.
Yep. Yeah, if you don't have it, someone else has it.
Right.
You don't know how many times we've cruised the paddock looking for parts, and usually we end up successful.
Exactly. So now, do the four of you all run the same chassis, or do you guys? Because I mean, there's not a lot of Formula V's new ones out there, so you're all picking up chassis from around the country. What do you guys run?
We run the Protoform, the P2.
Okay,
so it's the second edition of the Protoform.
Got it. So they're all four cars are the same, so that helps too. When the parts department, you don't have to bring 4 sets of parts to the track.
Absolutely, and it's a competitive car. It's it's tried and true, and it's nice all having the same edition.
Brian Straczynski is in the chat. Thank you for being there, and thank you for having a good Polish name. Us Polanskis know the Straczynskis. We can at least say it. And he says he's inviting iRacers to meet from the Formula V Rookie Series and offering them free tickets to sit in a real Formula V car. That's a pretty cool thing to do, to try to get some of those iRacers in.
Absolutely. How you doing, Brian?
There you go.
Nice to see him on here.
There you go. All right, so let's talk a little bit about COTA, okay? That's kind of one when I went to look for someone to talk to this week about what's going on in Austin this weekend. I flipped through last year's results, and I saw that Zach was a winner of both races, and he's from Austin. So I'm like, hey, perfect person to ask on. So let's talk a little bit about COTA. And I know, obviously, being in a Formula V doesn't translate necessarily to a lot of other cars on the track. But what do you like about COTA?
There's a lot of things. It's a special event because it's the hometown. I'm not from here, but we've lived here for 15 years or so. So the friends and the family and everyone kind of comes out. It's a big party. My wife and I have had the opportunity to experience maybe 8 or 9 Formula One races in Austin. And so it's just special, to see 200,000 people watching Formula One, and then you share that same track that those people watched and also raced on. I mean, it's amazing. The track itself too, sometimes I look at it on paper, and in Formula V, you want fast corners, tight spaces, and different things. And on paper, you go, well, maybe COTA's not it's not a Mid-Ohio or Laguna Seca, and then you run it and you go, no, that track's really fun. Nothing beats the S's at COTA. They're very fun.
Yeah, yeah. I get that a lot when I tell people that I'm doing the Super Tour this year, and they're kind of give you that, like, what does that mean? And I tell them, well, we go to Sebring and Watkins Glen and Circuit of the Americas and Road America, and they're like, oh, that's like, you guys do real racing, and I'm like, yeah, it's real racing. What's the hardest part about COTA?
You go into the first S, and you just, in the Formula Vee, you are moving and dancing and shaking and not breathing for about 35 seconds.
Yeah.
And then you come out and you look at your dash to see how you did on the, the plus minus, the timer. And okay, I did good, or okay, I got to fix something. But it's just like a 35-second blackout through the S's into turn. It's got to be 10. Yeah.
Okay. How long does it feel, that trip up to turn 1 going up the hill? Does that feel like it's forever in a Formula Vee?
It's not too bad.
Okay.
The beautiful thing about Formula Vee is it brings hard racing.
Mm-hmm.
And typically you look this way and you look this way, and there's a car on both sides.
Yeah.
So that makes the straightaways go a lot quicker. It goes quick.
You sent me a video, which I didn't have time to get working like I wanted to for this episode, but in that video, it looked like before you get to the hill, you've already been able to get up to pretty much where you're going to be speed wise. It's not like you're pulling up the hill in second or third gear. You're already in fourth before you really get to the hill, right?
100%.
Yeah, that must make it feel a little less slow.
Yeah, your fourth gear, I want to say by the start finish. Like I was telling you earlier, I just ran a vintage car in the Formula Vee at COTA, so it's a little bit different. And I was watching video and kind of going through my memory. Okay, where am I here? Where am I there? But I think you're in fourth gear by the start finish at COTA.
Sure.
So you've got a big run in fourth gear. You're getting up there.
What are the other keys to a quick lap at COTA? You said the S's. It's 3.4 miles? I don't remember the length. Three something, right?
Yep. 3.4 sounds right.
And some decent straights there besides that big straight going up to turn 1. What are the other challenges that you guys face? And I'm assuming they're similar for other series or other classes as well.
Yeah, the challenging thing about COTA is it's kind of interesting. The first year we ran here, we looked at the average track speed, and it's similar to Blackhawk.
Okay.
The corners here, you think about how long the straightaways are at COTA. For those two tracks that have the same average track speed, a little club track and huge COTA, it's unbelievable. And part of the reason is a lot of the corners at COTA are very slow. I mean, you're almost coming to a stop. So the key is rotating the car. You want to really be able to rotate the car quickly so you can slow down, get the car pointing in the right direction, and get back on the gas as soon as possible. And it's tough.
For those who might not know, Blackhawk Farms is a tiny little track. It's a 1.9 mile track, or at least it was when I lived in Wisconsin, just outside of Beloit. I believe it's actually in Illinois, technically. But it's, I mean, you could probably throw a stone into Wisconsin from Blackhawk, but really cool little club track, just like Zach said. Shocking to me that you would compare that to COTA.
Well, we can't believe it. So, as weird as it is living in Austin, Road America and Blackhawk are my home track.
Nice. Where are you from?
Neenah, Wisconsin.
Oh, yeah. I grew up in Lake Geneva.
Nice. So, my dad and older brother still live in Neenah. And so, yeah, I try to run Road America and Blackhawk as much as I can with them.
Yeah.
Those are kind of my home tracks until COTA's my new home track.
Yeah. Yeah. So the first race, when my dad got back into racing with that Formula Vee, the first race we ever did was Blackhawk Farms.
It's a special place.
It really is. I literally grew up at Blackhawk Farms. So
yes.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I
share that experience with you.
Yeah. And I understand now they don't have to stop the races to get in and out of the track anymore. They built like a little bridge, I think, didn't they? Or do they still have to cross over?
I think they still, I haven't been there in 2 years.
Okay.
But as of 2 years ago,
okay.
Yeah, you see the cars coming, and the corner workers are directing
Yeah.
you, and you go.
I really would have thought you'd have compared COTA more to Road America than to Blackhawk Farms.
Yeah, of course. I think the only comparison I was making is just the average speed.
Right.
And it just, when we saw that stat that the average speed ran around 80 miles an hour, it was just mind blowing that those were similar.
Yeah.
Because COTA with the long straights, it should be so much higher. But you're coming to a stop in many of the corners, and it makes COTA a very technical track.
So let's talk about weather. I haven't pulled up the forecast for this weekend. Let me see if I can do that. We're talking what kinds of weather should people be thinking about for this weekend at COTA?
So this race notoriously is, you don't know till you get there.
Right.
Before I started racing, or maybe the year I was getting my license, I watched Hunter Barron and Chris Jennerjohn go back to back in basically a snow race. My dad and I sat in the car and were freezing, and it was snowing out. I think Chris was on rain tires and Hunter was on slicks. That was a fun race to watch. And then last year we had a crazy ice storm. I've never pulled a trailer through inches of ice. And we were on track in the morning. There was ice on the track underneath. After the S's, there's a bridge that was dripping water, and it was creating ice as soon as it hit the track. It was 23 or 24 degrees temperature. That was the coldest time I've ever been in a race car. It was awful. But, awful in the moment and great in the story.
Right. Now, keeping in mind this is Wednesday and we're still a couple days away. The good news is I don't think you're going to see snow this weekend.
Good.
But it's supposed to be in the upper 50s, low 60s on Saturday and Sunday. Saturday morning, though, if you're from Wisconsin, you'll know what I'm talking about. Bring your gotchkis, because it's going to be 34 degrees Saturday morning when you get to the racetrack. A little long underwear time. It'll be good to wear your fire underwear for this race, right?
Perfect.
Yeah, awesome. So let's talk a bit here about, what Austin is a place where people want to go. It's one of those fun cities, music scene, food scene, South by Southwest. How many out of towners do you get for the Super Tour because it's Austin? I mean, obviously it's Circuit of the Americas, which is a Formula One track. But how do people get a chance to? What do they get to do if they're just not there for the races?
What is there to do in Austin? Is that what you're asking?
I know.
It depends on the time of the year.
Sure.
The lakes are obviously very popular in Austin in the summertime. But as I was telling you before, I've got a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old, so I'm about a decade out of telling you what's cool to do in Austin.
That'll change. They'll get a little bit older, and you'll get to go start having fun again eventually. So,
and what I'm doing right now is fun as well.
Absolutely. Big barbecue scene. Any recommendations for folks who are at the track? There used to be a place I heard that was not far up. That it's basically a legendary barbecue spot. Is that still there?
So Lockhart is the original city of.
Okay.
So it's got the 4 original barbecue places, and don't quiz me on what the 4 original
That's okay.
are. I think one of them's Black's, and I forget the other ones. Terry Black's downtown has gained a lot of popularity in the last couple of years. My personal favorite has been Mickelwaite's.
Okay.
It's right downtown. It's a little trailer. It's wonderful. Franklin's Barbecue has had unbelievable notoriety over the last decade. Anywhere. It doesn't matter. I mean, pick a barbecue place. You're not going to be disappointed. We don't have bad barbecue.
Sure. Yeah, I have found that, even being an East Coaster originally, I'm out in LA now, but I have sampled my share of barbecue. You don't get to be a man of ample girth like me without having a little barbecue. It's different than what you get back east, but it's good stuff. And if you go to Texas and you don't try brisket, you've made a mistake.
Yep.
That's some good stuff.
When we first moved here, again, 15 maybe, but visited a little bit earlier, they were explaining brisket. It was new to me.
Yeah.
I'd never heard of this word. And I think in the last decade, it's also gained popularity. You know, everyone kind of knows the secret's out, right? But it wasn't then. And I learned very quickly.
Yeah. I mean, being a Midwest boy, we didn't have brisket. That wasn't something we did. But I'm glad I do it now.
I'm not going back.
No, of course not.
Now that I know it's there.
Of course not. So tell me a little bit about your, what's a season for Zach look like these days? I know you got the 2 kids, and are you putting a program together to try to get to VIR in October, or what's your deal this year?
100%. I'm blessed. My wife and my kids are very, very understanding and supportive. They give me the nod to kind of, we talk about the season. They come to maybe half the events, and some willingly, some unwillingly, it depends which party. But they really give me a lot of freedom.
Cool.
And so, yeah, the runoffs are always on the schedule, at least since I've been racing. My first year, we did Sonoma, which, I mean, is unbelievable. It's like, welcome to your first year in a race car. You're going to drive at Sonoma for the runoffs.
Yeah.
It was nuts. And since then, we've hit every runoffs. And we plan on continuing to do so.
So do all 4 Whitstons make the runoffs typically?
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. And what's the program look? Do you hit other Super Tours? Do you do the divisional path? There's lots of different ways to get there.
We chase the Super Tour.
Okay.
And I think part of it is we have this time in front of us where the 4 of us are racing. And so the last few years have been unbelievable. We've been able to run Road Atlanta and Watkins Glen. And, we'll go to Road America for the June sprints. We've been to Pittsburgh. We've been all over.
Right.
And so typically we try to do one bucket list track a year. And then we'll follow the runoffs. If the runoffs is at a certain track and we feel like we need to go there, we'll go there in the spring or the summer to practice for the runoffs. We try to go to the June sprints, again, just because it's 45 minutes from my parents' house.
Right.
We've been going there forever, great experience. So we'll do 4 to 5 races in the runoffs a year.
Got it.
But we're chasing the Super Tour typically.
Yeah. Buttonwillow's on your bucket list, right? You got to come out and visit us. And
it's so far.
I know.
It's so far. That toe is wild.
Yeah. Well, it's better than Portland this year or Thunder Hill.
Correct. Yeah, we did. The longest we've done has been Watkins.
Yeah.
I think it was 25, 26 hours. And,
I got to think it's a similar toe, but it's not the allure of Watkins Glen. I'll admit it. I mean, obviously Watkins Glen is on that. I call it the sexy 6.
Okay.
Watkins Glen, Road America, Road Atlanta, Sebring, Daytona, and Laguna Seca. That's my sexy 6. If I gotta have bucket list tracks that SCCA races at, obviously I would love for us to do a race at Long Beach. That would be beyond cool. And COTA doesn't make this only because it doesn't have that that history, that allure of those other tracks. If I had a sexy 7, I would absolutely put COTA on there. But those are the high level tracks that we get to race at in the club, and that's something that when I tell people what we do, those are the tracks I rattle off. I don't rattle off Buttonwillow, and that's my home track now. I love it. It's a great place. We're setting up a second track, which we're going to race at starting this year. I hope we're almost there. So that's going to be really cool, and we'll probably talk about that a lot more during the Buttonwillow round of the Super Tour. But yeah, it's good stuff. Good stuff. All right. So, anything else we need to know about the Circuit of the Americas before we start heading out here?
If you haven't experienced it, you must. It's an absolute wonderful track in a great city, and it's part of the Super Tour. How could you not come?
Absolutely. That's a good sales pitch.
Yeah.
That's a good sales pitch. So, Zach, thank you so much for joining us. I can't thank you enough. Did I lose you?
I'm here.
Oh, that's okay. Cool. No, thanks for coming on. It's been great giving us some insight on the Super Tour, and really appreciate you hanging out with me. So,
cool. It's been my pleasure, Brian. Thank you.
All right, that's going to do it for another episode of Inside the SCCA. If you like what you're hearing or now watching, subscribe and like, especially subscribe and like here on the YouTube channel. That's going to help us out a bunch. It'd also be great if you leave some comments. We appreciate everybody who tuned in today. You can follow us on social media to find out who our next guest is, to leave a question there as well. New Inside the SCCA is now every Wednesday live, and the podcast will still go off on Fridays, just like we always have, the audio-only podcast. I'm Brian Belansky. Have a fantastic weekend. Stay safe, and go play with cars.
Hi, I'm Kelton Jago, and this is Inside the SCCA.
Inside the SCCA is a presentation of the Racing Wire Podcast Network and Rule 15 Productions. This podcast is not affiliated with, endorsed, or sponsored by the Sports Car Club of America. The views expressed within are those of the host and our guest.